that I might use. Like they don't use Twitter, they don't use Facebook, they don't use LinkedIn, they use WeChat. And in that environment, people were able to spread misinformation just constantly, like then write articles that are not false. And so it took us a long time. Like the moment we would post something that was like, hey, that's not true, we would get kicked out. And so we spent a lot of effort in these environments to create multiple accounts so we could like infiltrate these accounts. So if one person got kicked out, another person could come back in and continue to post. And I think that it follows the Tim Urban's, he wrote a book, the What's Our Problem book. We need to, when we think about politics and we think about policies, we have to understand that this is always the low-level thinking, because it was an evolutionary thing that we needed in order to survive. It's like, yes, I have to hate those other people in the other tribe, because if I don't, they'll come in, they'll attack us, and we'll be dead. And so our politics has always been focused on low-level thinking, and it is very difficult to get out of that mode. That is the kind of the mode that the metaverse and AI is pushing us towards, is more and more low-level thinking, because that's very good for these companies. And so it kind of allows us to isolate ourselves, but then there's also that the collective outrage that we describe sometimes as like the cancel culture or like the woke mob. The way that it's described is basically a lot of outrage can really impact a person. So in some ways it's good. It means that like the community can get together and then they can force some kind of change just through this kind of public shaming of an organization. But at the same time, if all of the data isn't based on facts and it's just based on like collective outrage, then we're going to make mistakes. And sometimes people will be judged before all the facts have come out. And so to move away from this tribalism, there is kind of a need to focus a lot more on the critical thinking aspect. And this is the thing I often say for young students is that's what you need to focus on. The reason I say like, hey, the AI, do 10 times as much means that you spend way less time on generation, like generating the text from nothing. Don't worry about that. I'm more interested in, do you know what good text looks like? Do you know what a good picture looks like? Do you know what a good behavior on the social media platform looks like? Sure. And can you judge that differently from the ones that are bad or not good or harmful? I think that this is the critical skill that is so important. Like we focus on these basics of like writing and reading, and I feel like it's wasted, really, or maybe we even focus on coding. But they don't often tell you, hey, focus on like learning AI and learning how these, like what is important in these AI systems, because that would give you a lot of power and that could allow you to resist what they're trying to push upon you. Sure. But it is really this critical thinking that is going to give us the type of collective movement towards the better future. Like the one that cares about the environment, the one that cares about like the minorities, or the ones that care about those who are most marginalized by AI systems, including like the kind of digital colonialism that is happening right now with the training of your data and the marking of data systems and the human detection of harm. These are all types of exploitation that is happening today.
Indeed, it is. Audience, Amini, Dr. Ed, David, Javier, Terrence, follow them, embrace them. They're our community, they're your community. We only do this together, we don't do it at all. Thank you so much, Pamela, for joining us. Our gather has been well. Thank you for joining us once again. We had an incredible panel just now on the expression and the exploration of virtual cities? What does that look like when we start talking about, yes, virtual cities, that you can one day relate to a city virtually as common as you would Paris, Austin, San Francisco, New York, that you would one day refer to a virtual community that has the populace of a natural, real city, as we must consider that we are extending reality. I'm bringing Devin Baldwin up with us now to have a brief discussion on what does it look like at the intersection of the metaverse, AI, and STEM. Devin, your mic, sir. We welcome you. We greet you.
Thank you for having me, Chris. Thank you, Gatherverse community, for having me as well. I'm glad
We're
to be here.
certainly happy to have you here. Devin, let's lead into it. When we start talking about STEM technology, with the few minutes that we have to be able to expand, why is this critically important, especially under the banner of education, which certainly has a place in my heart, and I know it has a place in yours, and many of our audience that are with us today, educators and professors and teachers and parents and mentors. When we talk about the power of STEM at this very frail intersection of,
Mm.
of XR and the metaverse, what does that look like to you, and why should we be concerned?
Well, for me personally, let me just give a little context. I am an educator. I teach WebXR development to middle school and high school children and some adults, but mainly I work with kids, mainly the youth of the Bay Area, the Oakland area, mainly underserved communities, Black and brown children. And very early on within that realm, you see that there's a lack of access. And we have to realize where our education system is now, which they recently closed down a number of schools in Oakland due to there's just many there's teacher strikes, there's many things happening education wise to where the teachers don't feel supported enough to teach these students. So the education system has failed them. Where STEM comes in is it is now something to where it's tangible. Well, the way I first got introduced to, working with kids in STEM is I went through a nonprofit called STEM Tank, and I taught kids how to do basically digital fabrication using the laser cutter, 3D printer, and different things like that. And the thing that really sparked the light in my head was when I was like, okay, these kids are actually very intrigued with the tangible aspect of tech, seeing something that, you know, they can touch, they can, design, taking it from a an idea on the computer, sending it over to the printer, sending it to the laser cutter, and having a physical something they can touch. It's very transformative. Um, and from the perspective I have within my classroom, I take a different approach. I want the kids to understand, like, hey, this is something that you need to understand, and I'm going to make sure that you understand it. I'm going to take as much time as it takes to get you to understand it. We have a set, course, but I'm very patient and I'm there for my kids. I listen. It's a very important thing with kids because kids ultimately just want to be heard. When they're heard, they're able to they're able to kind of relax and comprehend and take in things.
Do you have a concern, Devin, when it comes to these emerging technologies such as AI in particular, when it
Mhm.
comes to the lack of availability for especially our underserved communities in places in cities like Oakland and Compton and elsewhere, that they're not getting enough information to understand what's coming their way?
Absolutely. Because more than likely they're not. And I'll be blatantly honest. Most of the time they don't care.
Sure.
Like they don't care. They only care about what's on social media. They only care about what's happening with celebrities and music artists. It's really, getting them to understand the importance of STEM and what it can make for you and what it can really give you. I do my best and I go into every class, every situation saying, it'd be amazing if I can reach them all, but if I can just reach one or two, if I can just reach one or two.
And you know what? That's so heartfelt and so precious, even with our time that's now spent together. I have to say that as a child that grew up in those streets of Oakland with the work that you're doing, I had a dad. I had a dad that was a technologist. My dad was a brilliant technologist. I've been in technology for a very long time. Weren't for him, I would not be sitting here with you today. The work that you're doing is some of the most heartfelt work that I've ever come across in life. Those who take the pilgrimage opportunity to spend some of their lives to reach to our underserved communities, no matter the color, no matter the background, that don't have access and that reach out to our children. I hope everyone gives you every opportunity that they have from their heart to help support you, Devin. Thank you for joining us today. Our gather was well, sir.
Thank you, my friend. Until next time.
It's time to have a discussion. I want to lean forward into science. I want to lean forward into molecular biology. And who better to do it with than a molecular biologist who has been working in this space for many years at this intersection of XR and AI. And as it was so appropriately expressed in the panel that we just had, that we haven't even completely wrapped our minds around the impact of COVID-19. Has this technology pacified us? Have we really passed by the opportunity to get right that was what we found ourselves exposed by the pandemic? We're going to talk about this and a little bit more at this intersection. First, I bring up Ippolito Caradonna, fellow technologist, brilliant scientist, and a very dear friend. Ippolito, we're happy to have you here with us today.
Happy to be here. Thank you so much, Chris. Great talk, great gather so far, very inspiring. Great to hear all the community gathering and contributing to such an important conversation.
Absolutely, indeed. And we must say congratulations on the extension of your family.
Thank you. Thank you.
We're happy to have you here. Amani, help me to be able to venture off. Let's take it to a different level when we talk about the nature of science and using these technologies. But I want to talk about it with the hard work that you're doing and developing in the prototype of AugLab. You've been working on this for many years and understanding the nature of when we think about the laboratory and what we also think about the intersection of these technologies that we're building today and have been building for years and how much more relevant have they become today. Can you bring us a bit into your world and what you've been looking at for some time now and why it's so important?
Yes, happy to. So as you mentioned, AugLab is an AR software interface for laboratory production. In short, I guess simplistically, you would say it helps scientists, any scientists, navigate any given laboratory space using a spatially projected interactive environment. And this technology actually was a brainchild in the incubator that we're both a part of called Hollow Practice. Within that space, it was able to form, if you will, and really just be watered and nourished. And what it's become in light of the pandemic is something that's completely inseparable to our way of life. And so what I mean by that is, why wouldn't we use all the emerging technologies that we can to tackle the next pandemic? Why wouldn't we harness all of the technology, all of the information, all of these breakthroughs that are happening right now to arm the frontline medical workers, the vaccine developers, and all of the medical and research community with the most cutting edge technology. And that's really the basis of OGLab in terms of equipping research scientists in the lab.
When we think about this, and this is so striking and so important, and have we learned this the consideration that sometimes things don't matter until it becomes so prevalent to you and it starts knocking on your door and my door and our doors, if you will. And it seems to me now is the time that we start building for the next um, catastrophe or pandemic. This that is soon and certainly sure to arrive.
Right.
And when we think about our frontline workers, who we care about, our servicemen and women, first responders, globally, in the hard work that they do. We think about the residual fallout that's happened medically. And when we think about society and how disruptive the pandemic has been, which has been the greatest disruptor contemporary in our time, we talk about AI and metaverse disruption, but that pales in comparison to, and is rather finite compared to the disruption that the pandemic has brought to our shores when it comes to COVID-19. With the work that you're doing, when we start talking about OGLab and the use of headsets, Apple just came out with what I believe is a brilliant first introduction of 1.0 version of a headset, where I have the capability to be able to film and capture in live my memories, if you will. And it seems that they're attempting to fit and fortify a volumetric system onto a headset, which is a very intriguing prospect. When we think about that in the lab,
Mm-hmm.
right? How much more important might it be when we think about AI and augmented reality when it comes to lab development and in the medical industry and for science?
It's it's so important, and I would love to bring it back to the front line and the men and women that are um, doing the hard work to prepare for the next pandemic. And that doesn't just that goes across many different spectrums, many verticals. That's the hospital workers. But that's also where I fit in, where it's is the laboratory scientists that are working diligently day and night. And so I would love to focus and steer your attention to the wellness of those individuals. See, because the vaccines and all of the developments are to actually preserve or to save human lives, it's important to understand the lives that are behind those products and the stress um, and the weight that's on those individuals. And why it's so important when we talk about sharing a volume of space, when we talk about sharing a laboratory process, why it's so important is what NASA recently calls cognitive load. Okay, so